What's up, y'all? Long time no see. Welcome back to No Table Talk. It's your boy, Otumba. Let's get into it. So this is probably not going to be as long as they usually are, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be as impactful. It's going to be as heavy. You get what I'm saying? It's going to be as relevant. This one kind of hits, kind of home to me, pretty close to me. It was kind of personal to me, because it's something that has been cultivated from certain realizations that I've had. Now that I think about it, that's kind of like all the episodes, really. They really all just come from realizations that I have that I apply to me primarily, and then I think would be better served to apply to everybody else. But this is one of those ones. This is one of those ones. It's pretty undesirable to be blind. I mean, nobody really wants that. It's pretty undesirable to be blind. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but it's admittedly undesirable. But what's worse than being blind? Being blind and continuing to operate like you can see clearly. That's worse than being blind. And it's very, very dangerous too, because then you could run into a lot of trouble, both literally and figuratively. You will run into lots of trouble, man. You will run into lots of trouble. If you're blind and you just operate like you can see clearly, you run into lots of trouble. I came across this Bible passage, which kind of cultivated this whole topic for me. And it led me down the path to just make certain changes in my life. Admit to certain changes that I need to be made or needed to be made. And then when I went ahead to make those changes. But I wanted to share it. So it's John chapter 9. John chapter 9, verse 39. And this was Jesus speaking. He said, I entered this world to render judgments, to give sight to the blind, and to show those who think that they see, that they are blind. And a little further down in verse 41, he says, if you were blind, you wouldn't be guilty, but you remain guilty because you claim you can see. And I read this and I was thinking about it, especially in the context of this chapter. In this chapter, you see that there was a blind man that Jesus healed. And he was placed in comparison to another set of people who are the religious leaders, the Pharisees and the other religious leaders who were blind but claimed they could see clearly. You get what I'm saying? So these two sets of people were placed in contrast. The blind man was healed by Jesus. The Pharisees who Jesus confronted subliminally as being blind, but claimed they could see clearly, refused to own up to their blindness. Or you would say that even throughout the whole work of Jesus on earth, throughout their interactions with him, they refused to own up to their blindness. You know what I'm saying? But these two sets of people are placed in contrast with each other. You feel me? One set being identified by the man that was blind, received his healing. You feel me? And the other sets received nothing because they never owned up to their blindness. And I was thinking about it personally, about just different areas in my life where I could be blind and claim I could see clearly. You feel me? Or act like I could see clearly. And like I said, it's pretty dangerous because, I mean, just imagine a blind person choosing to operate like they aren't blind. They choose not to, first of all, own up to their blindness. They choose not to use maybe their cane. They choose not to use the assistance of others or other guides that may have been created for them to supplement for the lack of their senses, or for the lack of that one sense, being sight. You feel me? And they just choose to act like they can see clearly. They just they just run without caution. They don't take deliberate steps to check the next step. You feel me? They just choose to act like they're not blind. They just act like they can see clearly. And one can just imagine the different types of trouble they could run into. You get me? And admittedly, like we could think about, like we would assume, that's very, very dangerous. That's very, very dangerous. To the detriment of this individual that is blind. And just as I have been challenged, I would like to pose this challenge to the rest of us. And challenge us to own up to our blindness. You feel me? To own up to our blindness. And it could be a challenge. And the reason I'm posing it as a challenge is because owning up to your blindness is not necessarily easy. He gets me. You see, these Pharisees in this story, one could see how they had a lot to lose, especially when they read their different accounts and the different perspectives in the Bible. You can see how they held certain things there. They held their position as religious leaders there. They held the perception that other people had of them. They held the different areas of prestige that they held, that they had been given in society. They held that pretty dear to themselves. You feel me? And even in their different interactions with Jesus, they saw Jesus as a threat to those things. They saw him as a threat to even people listening to them. They saw the people believing in Jesus as a threat to people no longer believing in them, or whatever they could have been carrying. They saw it as a threat to people no longer being as committed in the synagogue. You feel me? So there are certain things they held there. And you could see how they would think to themselves that them owning up to their blindness could come at a great cost to them. And that could apply to a lot of us in the same way. Because you see, owning up to your blindness in certain areas, owning up to your frailties, owning up to areas where you need to make adjustments, where you need to change your perspective, where you need to make correction. It can be pretty hard for us because we may need to let go of certain things. Even in correction in general, you feel me? When we are corrected about certain things, first of all, nobody likes to be corrected. It doesn't make anybody feel good. When the works of your hands are criticized, it feels like an indictment on your person. You feel me? It feels like something that you did or something that you're involved in has been disqualified in a way, and it never feels good. It never feels good. That's why even in the area of the workplace, constructive criticism, or the ability to take on constructive criticism and apply it appropriately is deemed a skill. It's deemed a skill, meaning that it's not a common ability, meaning that there has been areas that have been identified where this extra amount of effort is required. You feel me? That's why it's called a skill. And so that it's being a skill, it means that it's not easy to just take on criticism. It's never easy to just put your efforts into something or allow something to be a part of you and that thing being called out. It's not easy to just own up to it and make the correction. It takes a great deal of effort on your part, you feel me? And for some of us, that effort, or it may come at the cost of putting aside your pride, putting aside your ego. For some of us, it may come at the cost of time that we may think we have spent. It may come at the cost of certain resources that we may think we may have spent. It may come at the cost of letting go of certain habits, you feel me, that have just grown convenient over time. It It may come at the cost of unlearning certain things. It may come at the cost of learning certain things, which would all take effort. It may come at the cost of losing certain friendships. It may come at the cost of stepping away from certain settings, removing yourself from certain situations. At the end of the day, it's come at some efforts on your part. You feel me? I mean, I think of, I'm as a Nigerian, and a lot of us Nigerians could relate to this, especially those of us who live in Nigeria or have grown up in Nigeria or grew up in Nigeria. You could just hear on the news someday that this building just collapsed from nowhere. It just crumbled to the floor. And all the occupants in the building died. Or we could even see certain buildings that are sinking, or certain buildings that are leaning to one side. You feel me? And whenever I think of that, I'm like, this is evidently human error. Meaning that at the point of construction of this building, it's very, very possible that along the way, somebody realized that we made a mistake. Somebody realized that we didn't use the right foundation, or we didn't apply the right principles in the building of this foundation, especially when you factor in the area where this building is being erected and stuff like that. Somebody realized certain filters that were being implemented. Somebody realized that, okay, the materials we're using are not up to grade. And in that realization, they could also have been like, you know what, let's just, you know what, it's fine. We spent time. We've spent money. We've paid for materials. We've paid for labor. We've put in a lot of time so far. We have a deadline to reach. You hear me? Somebody may have realized there are areas of blindness along the way, but they chose not to own up to it, and they just forge ahead. You feel me? And even in that example, you could see that even owning up to your blindness could come at the cost of you saying that you want to stop, tear down everything you've done, and start over properly. And yeah, that could be a great cost. But when one thinks of the cost of just forging ahead and choosing not to make those corrections, and fast forward to the future, you see that this building has just crumbled at the cost, and taking along with it precious lives. One starts to ask themselves, was it worth it? You feel me? Was it worth it? At the end of the day, wouldn't it have been more worth it to stop, implement the corrections that you know need to be implemented, and then move ahead? At the end of the day, what one may have thought of as a great cost in the past could have been a saving grace for the future. You feel me? Now, those investments that they were trying to safeguard in just forging ahead, they've lost it. Because either this building has collapsed, or now it's sinking to the point where it's inhabitable. You feel me? So it's either abandoned, or you have to demolish it anyway, as opposed to just making the corrections you needed to make at whatever cost would have applied to you at that point in time for the long run. Now your investments could make greater yield, could yield greater gain. You feel me? I want to encourage us to own up to our blindness. Because like I said, it's very dangerous to be blind, but act like you can see clearly. It's very, very dangerous. Very, very dangerous. And like as I said, it's been something I've challenged myself on recently, and allowed myself to sometimes go through the cost that's required for now, for the good of the future. For the good of the future. And especially for those of us who are thinking more long term, who are thinking to be more sustainable. in whatever area it applies to you, let's own up to our blindness. Let's own up to our blindness. You see, in this Bible verse I read, it's really beautiful because Jesus did not just say, or did not even just criticize, really. He said he entered the world for this reason, to give sight to the blind and to make those that think they see clearly realize that they are blind. Because being blind in itself is really fine. It's really fine. But not owning up to that blindness. Being blind but acting like you can see or claiming you can see clearly. Like he said, that's when your indictment comes. That's when you're deemed guilty. And as Jesus phrased it, he entered the world for this reason, to give sight to the blind. And even those who think they can see clearly, in order to gain sight, you have to own up to your blindness. You have to recognize where you are blind. You have to know where to apply those corrections that are being laid out in front of you. So I want to encourage us, own up to your blindness, because that's the first step in you gaining sight. That's the first step in you seeing clearly. Thank you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to another episode of Notable Talk. I hope this blessed you. I hope this spoke to you in some way. I hope this imparted you. I hope this met you at the point of your need. And I hope that we are willing to do whatever it takes to gain sight, to truly see clearly, and not to just walk blindly all the rest of our lives. Thank you. Thank you. Have a blessed one. All right, peace.
Sit back, relax, and chill. Grab a glass of wine or a cup of tea, 'cause you're listening to No Table Talk.